All right, Vice President Joe Biden there. Liz, what did you think of his remarks?
Well, you know, I think his remarks, he was so emotional, so serious, and raised how high the stakes are in this election. And I think, one of the reasons why President Obama picked him to be his vice president wasn't because, he was going to win a state, not because he was going to be some, great vice presidential candidate, because he was so well regarded, especially when it came to his judgment on foreign policy and things like that. And I think he articulated so well the high stakes of this election and why we cannot cede it and hand over the presidency to someone as reckless as Donald Trump.
What did you think of his performance, John?
I think for a guy who did not want to be speaking tonight, meaning a guy that really wanted to be the presidential nominee, that was one heck of a speech. I thought it was probably the most captivating of the evening, certainly, even on a night when President Obama spoke. And I thought particularly at the end, where he basically chided Donald Trump for talking about making America great again. And Biden basically was like, America is great, and here's what's great about it.
Yeah.
And don't talk down my country, and don't talk down our people.
Right.
I thought that was fabulous. You don't hear a lot of that at Democratic conventions, and I thought it was. I'm not saying that Democrats aren't patriotic. I'm just saying you don't hear a lot of that.
Right.
And I thought it was a big moment for him, and this crowd went nuts, and that's good for the Democratic Party nationally to have that crowd response to that kind of talk.
But I think what's also the contrast, right, between the gravitas tonight here between, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Tim Kaine, and then, other nights, Bill Clinton, and what we saw at the Republican convention. I mean, it's just worlds apart. And there's no comparison. I mean, who did they have? Jeff Sessions. And so tonight especially, it was so serious, it was so emotional, and it really raised the stakes of this election.
Well, it resonated with this crowd. I mean, at one point, the vice president saying no major party nominee in the history of this nation has known less or been less prepared to deal with national security than Donald Trump. And he said he doesn't have a clue, not a clue. The crowd reacted with that chant, not a clue, not a clue. And then, as you talked about it, Liz, he segued to some other very emotional moments, including when he talked about his son, Beau Biden. I think we have a little bit of that sound. Let's listen to that.
This is kind of a bittersweet moment for Jill and me and our family. In 2008, when he was about to deploy to Iraq, and again in 2012, our son Beau introduced me to the country and placed my name in nomination. You got a glimpse. I know I sound like a dad, but you got a glimpse what an incredibly fine young man Beau was.
Liz, obviously, such a poignant moment there, and you talked about this reservoir of goodwill that he has. Obviously, this was a struggle for him even to make the decision. There was a time where he was considering running for the White House, but he talked about these family considerations really being a very, very difficult thing for him. He couldn't do it, just couldn't do it.
Yeah, and emotion is not something that comes that easily to politicians, especially male politicians. And one thing that did resonate with me, and I think would resonate with a lot of people, was the vulnerability that some of these guys showed. And one thing I really liked about the introduction video of President Obama was it wasn't just rah-rah. It wasn't just, these are all the things I accomplished. It went through how disappointed he was that he wasn't able to achieve the results he wanted on gun safety, even after all these horrible mass tragedies, including the murder of all those children at Newtown. And, you saw him shedding tears and everything like that. So it was a very heavy moment. And a lot of the times you think of conventions as parties. And the heavy nature of this, I think, helped elevate the stakes of this election and showed why we can't hand over the White House to a charlatan entertainer like Donald Trump.
Yeah, and the vice president at one point also saying, again, we've been talking a lot about America and their families and the decisions, for example, President Obama has had to make, but they all pivoted to talking about Hillary Clinton. And I thought the vice president got a rousing cheer when he said, God willing, Hillary Clinton will write the next chapter in our journey. We are America, second to none. And this line was, we own the finish line. I mean, that's just, if people love sports analogies, if they love, to feel good about this country, that seemed to really resonate with this crowd, John.
I think the Democrats, to Liz's point earlier about sort of the all-star cast of Democrats out here, I mean, there's sort of a double meaning to that. America owns the finish line, but you've got two former presidents, or one current president, one former president, vice president of the United States out here, all sorts of people making the recommendation of Hillary Clinton. I think the Democrats feel like they own the finish line of the presidential race, that it is theirs to lose. A little bit of payback tonight, Joe Biden for Hillary Clinton in 2008. After she gave her speech for Obama, he came rushing down to find her in the holding room and fell to a knee to say thank you to her for the incredible speech she gave for Obama at a time when people were wondering about that. You see that tonight, Biden paying that favor back a little bit.
I want to ask about something, John, that you said earlier. I'll ask this of you, Liz. The notion that towards the end of the vice president's speech there was almost a patriotic defense, if you will, of what it means to be a Democrat, what it means to be part of this particular belief system, that almost seemed personal in the way that Joe Biden was delivering that argument. Did you get that sense too?
Yes, because when we watch the Republican convention, if you just listen to them, you would think that Democrats aren't patriotic, that we don't care about, the people in our military, that we don't care about our country, that we don't care about, everyone in our society. And so I think it was a direct counter to that. And these are people who have been there. They have had to, direct the military. They've had to make a lot of tough decisions, whereas Donald Trump's biggest responsibility in the last few years has been, firing celebrities on The Apprentice. So I think it was very important for them to show that Democrats do care about the country and combat this very irresponsible rhetoric on the part of Republicans.
I also think, though, that was echoed in President Obama's speech, and it harkened back to his 2004 speech here when he was then just a state senator, where he talked about, believing not in a blue America and a red America, but the United States of America. And he says, Republicans, Democrats have agreed historically in the past. That's what we do as a nation. We have these two parties. And he even mentioned Ronald Reagan, but he equated what Donald Trump was saying to being so far away. He said that's not the Republican Party. That's not even conservatism. So echoing not only what Joe Biden said, but a little bit of his speech in 2004.
Yeah, and I think also trying to appeal to Republicans who looked at their convention and said this isn't Republicanism, this isn't conservatism. I mean, the hard thing for a lot of Republicans is Donald Trump isn't a moderate per se. In
what does that mean, per se?
I mean, there's almost nothing about...
Don't speak Latin here, John. This is after the gavel.
All right. So there's a chair-throwing aspect to the way that Donald Trump does business, right? Moderate is not the first word that would come to mind. But at the same time, he's not a conservative. The things that make him so unusual and outstanding are not the conservative values. Usually, when you're talking about extremism, you're talking about ideological extremism, and that's not what you're talking about with Trump. So it's a very different construct, but I think there are a lot of Republicans that don't feel like they're seeing republicanism or conservatism.